This is Katie Brennan, the woman at the center of a scandal in Governor Phil Murphy's administration. A scandal that is both maddening and frustrating because after all of this time, we still don't really know what happened. It's not for lack of trying. So far, the Joint Legislative Investigative Committee has held 6 days of hearings and heard 40 days of testimony, and after all of that, they still don't have answers to the most basic questions. And so the hearings continue. This all started with an accusation of rape by Katie Brennan when she was working for the Murphy campaign against a man who also worked for the campaign. This is Al Alvarez. Katie Brennan says in April of 2017, Alvarez gave her a ride back to her Jersey City home after a campaign event. He asked to come inside to use the bathroom and to get a glass of water. It was then that Katie Brennan says he tried to force himself on her. Brennan says she was able to get away and then he left. And then she did everything that a rape victim is supposed to do. She called her husband, who was overseas away on a business trip. She called a friend to come stay with her. The next morning, she went to the hospital and got an invasive rape examination. And then she went to the police. Esther Suarez, the Hudson County prosecutor, recused herself from the case because she was friends with Al Alvarez, and she was also on the short list to be Governor Murphy's attorney general. But it was Alvarez who made the announcement they weren't going forward with the case because of a lack of evidence. They weren't even going to take it to a grand jury. It is important to point out here that Al Alvarez denies the sexual assault and says everything was consensual. But let me ask you a question. If it was consensual, would Katie Brennan have called her husband immediately afterwards? Doesn't seem to make sense. Now, the story could have ended there, except that Alvarez and Brennan were both hired for high-paying executive positions in the Murphy administration. So when Katie Brennan found out that the man she says raped her was now her co-worker, she went to person after person in the Murphy administration saying, look, I can't work with this man. And person after person said, we'll take care of it. And they didn't. She even emailed the governor and the first lady just asking for a meeting about a personal matter and got a response immediately from the governor from his personal email account saying, we know you well, hang in there, we're on it. They weren't on it. In fact, Governor Murphy still insists he didn't know about the rape allegations until months after he wrote that email. Finally, when all else failed, Katie Brennan told her story to the Wall Street Journal, and then people took it seriously. It's been a year now since Phil Murphy was sworn into office, and that fateful night in April of 2017 still haunts him and his administration because he and the people closest to him handled the Katie Brennan situation like frat boys trying to cover for a friend. And now, after all these hearings, people still don't know answers to the most basic questions like, who hired Al Alvarez after he was accused of rape? And why was he allowed to keep showing up to work months after he was told to find another job? Look, I don't know about you, but when I've been fired in my life, I wasn't allowed to show back up for my job. And guess what? They stopped paying me. Not Alvarez. They gave him a raise. And why won't the Hudson County prosecutor turn over emails that the investigative committee has requested? If she recused herself, she should have nothing to hide. And the Middlesex County Prosecutor's Office, who was given the case, has now decided also to not press charges. But they didn't seem to do much of an investigation, and they didn't follow the law to sit down Katie Brennan and explain why. The question is, why not? It sure does seem like a cover-up, doesn't it? The question is, who are they covering up for and why? It sure seems like all investigative roads lead to Governor Murphy. If no one else in his administration is willing to take responsibility, that only leaves the man at the top to answer questions. So far, members of the investigative committee have been reluctant to call the governor, but now they may be left with no choice. To not call him would seem, well, shallow at best. And by the way, Where are the women in the pig hats marching on Trenton? And for that matter, where's the national media demanding answers? In this Me Too era, it is beyond belief that an alleged rape victim who did everything that a rape victim is supposed to do is being ignored by the very people who are supposed to care. Of all the unanswered questions in the Katie Brennan case, perhaps the most troubling one is, when will Katie Brennan find justice?
And no survivor should have to tell their story to the newspaper to be heard.
I'm Larry Menti.
I had access
See you
to
again
people
next
in
week.
the highest positions of power in the state of New Jersey. And at each turn, my pleas for help went unanswered.